Everyone. Welcome to our October NetBox community meetup. Glad to see you. I think we've got quite a group here. I think we're up to in the 50s, so that's great to see. Great attendance. So today on the call, I'll introduce myself, Richard Boucher. I'm a product manager at NetBox Labs. We've also have Mark Coleman, who's our chief evangelist. Who'll also be will be sharing the speaking duties today, and we have a couple of great guest speakers which we'll introduce a little later on. If we jump right into it. So this is what we have scheduled for today's call. We talk to you a little bit about some of the awesome upcoming events that are happening around the NetBox community. Give you a few little updates around what's happening with NetBox itself. And then we'll get into our guest speakers. We have Adam and Peter. And at the end, we'll open it up to an open discussion around any other topics that anybody wants to discuss. So without further ado, let's jump into it. I'm not sure how many of you have attended any of the webinars in the past, but we've seen tremendous interest and we have great success as well with a lot of the latest webinars that we've run that are our own Rich Bibby has run, particularly the IPAM one that was last week. I think was our it broke all records in terms of attendance and signups. So that was great. And there we got a lot of positive feedback, a lot of great engagement, great questions. It was just, it's amazing. IP addressing's been around for so long, but it's still amazing. All the complexities, all the intricacies, all of the nuances about managing it. So there was a lot of great content in that, and it's not on this slide, but the recording for that those who missed it but have interest in IPAM, the recording will be available shortly. You can check on our website. But in the same vein of that, we've got some other great webinars coming up. Most importantly, next week we have one about change management, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. We're releasing change management this week. So we'll have a webinar talking about change management and how that happens in NetBox. So that'll be happening on October. Actually, that's a typo there. It's not October 10th. It's Thursday of next week. So I guess that's probably October 20th, I'm guessing. Apologies for that typo there. Mark, if you feel like jumping in and you've got the correct date, please correct me. And
I am searching for it as we speak.
Thanks, Mark. And in the similar vein to the IPAM webinar that we did that Rich did last week, there will be one on DSIM in early November, November 5th in particular. So, these are two great webinars. There's also plenty of webinars that we've run in the past, as I mentioned, like IPAM. We did one in branching in late August, for example. Those are all available as recordings if you want to watch them after the fact on our website. So all of that is available at netboxlabs.com/events, where you can sign up for upcoming webinars or watch pre-recorded or the recorded versions of those. So sorry, I see somebody's chiming in on the yeah, so it's the 24th. So this change management should read the 24th instead of the 10th. I apologize for that. Similarly, we're going to be at AutoCon next month. So for those not familiar with AutoCon, it is the premier network automation event. It was kicked off last year in Denver, or just outside of Denver in November last year. There was one earlier this year in Europe, in Amsterdam to be specific. And now we're on to AutoCon 2, which will happen again in the Denver area in late November. And we're going to be there. We'll be doing a number of different events. One of the important pieces is the Network Automation Zero to Hero workshop, which will be part. So there's a workshop session of the AutoCon before the event itself. The event proper is Wednesday through Friday. But on the Monday and Tuesday, there'll be a bunch of workshops, half-day workshops, and we'll be piloting one of those, the Zero to Hero workshop. So feel free to sign up for that. We'll also be having a social mixer on the Wednesday evening for NetBox and friends. So anybody kind of from the NetBox community, both partners and users of NetBox and customers, we'd love to see you there. So the registration is not quite open on our website for that. So check on that in the coming days. We'll be making that the registration site for that live. So we'd love to see you at AutoCon too. Don't be a stranger. Anything you wanted to add to that, Mark? I know you're.
Yeah, just a couple things. So for the automation workshop, you need, if you're not familiar with AutoCon, there's like the conference proper, which is Wednesday to Friday. And then there are the workshops. They're on the Monday and the Tuesday. The workshops require a separate ticket. I think they've got a lot more workshops this time. And if you already have one of those tickets, you can use that QR code to go straight there and find us. You can also just search for the name. We're going to be looking at going from what I'd call like traditional network management all the way through to intent-based networking with a bunch of our partners. So we've got Peter on the call today from SlurpIt. So SlurpIt's going to be in there. We're going to be using NetPicker for config assurance. We're going to be using some Ansible. And we're also going to be using iSinger to do the monitoring. So it's going to be a really interesting workshop that'll take you all the way to doing intent-based networking if that's new for you. And then we expect to publish a whole bunch of that after as well so that you can catch up if you weren't able to make it to AutoCon.
Cool. Thanks, Mark. Exciting stuff. Hope to see some of you there. So feel free to chime in on the chat if you're planning on being there. We'd love to hear from you. So moving on, let's talk a little bit about NetBox news. So NetBox, as we kind of mentioned last month, and I'm sure you're all aware, NetBox 4.1 came out early September. And we've quickly rolled on into NetBox 4.2 planning and development. And so we're kind of in the thick of things right now. NetBox 4.2 is planned for late this year, like late December, pardon me, going into early January, maybe of the new year, but kind of that rough time frame. And one of the big focuses of the NetBox 4.2 release is to make a push for some features that have been kind of on the ISP telco wish list for a while that we decided it was kind of worthwhile to make an effort to get them over the finish line. And so there are a number of these features that were identified through a working group that we did with a number of ISPs and telcos. And so three of these are VLAN translation, virtual circuits, and Q&Q tunneling that are kind of at the stage now where the maintainer team has drafted essentially solutions, architectures, data models to support these features, and we're looking for feedback from the community on these things. So if any of these topics is of interest, or you're coming from an ISP telco, or even if you're not, and you're a large organization where these features would be of interest, I would strongly encourage you to go check these feature requests out and comment as necessary, so that we build the tool that you're looking for. So that's there. If you want to engage in a more interactive way, there is a Slack channel in the NetDev community associated with the working group that's kind of working through some of these issues. So feel free to join in the conversation there. Any and all feedback is always appreciated. So that's it. So that's actively moving forward to be delivered in the 4.2 NetBox release sometime in late December. In other NetBox news, last week we announced some updates to Diode. So Diode is an ingestion service for NetBox. For those not familiar, it's a sidecar service that runs alongside NetBox and simplifies the process of ingesting data into NetBox. So essentially, it abstracts certain elements of the NetBox data model to make it simpler for large, or different types of data to be brought into. You can think of if you wanted to import CSV files or large spreadsheets, or from an inventory system, or any other type of environment that might have a version of the source of truth, and you wanted to be able to import that into NetBox easily, Diode simplifies that process. And so, and I know a number of you in the community have been testing it out. Diode is still in what we call our public preview. You can think of it as it's still in the beta phase. We plan on making it GA later this fall. But in part of that public preview, we've decided to kind of release some enhancements that have been kind of asked for. So the two big set of enhancements. One is some enhancements around the plugin. So there's a Diode plugin in that's kind of part of the Diode solution. The Diode plugin in the past was just a way for the Diode service to kind of wire up to NetBox and get access to the ORM to interact with all the data models. Now we've added kind of additional intelligence, and most importantly, a user interface on top of it, so that you can actually see what Diode is doing from within NetBox. So it includes an ingestion log viewer, so you can actually see the reconciliation log, so you can see the data that came in and how it was reconciled against the data that already exists in NetBox, and what are the changes that were proposed based on that inbound data. So you have full visibility on that, as well as the ability to configure certain aspects of Diode directly in the plugin. Most importantly, what API keys are used and kind of the endpoint of where the Diode service lives. As I mentioned, it's a sidecar service, so it kind of sits as a service on the side. You can host it anywhere you want. Obviously, all that's needed is network connectivity between Diode and NetBox, and that can be configured in the plugin. We've also added in the latest release of Diode virtualization model support. So all the whole family of model types that exist for virtualization are now supported for ingestion in Diode. That for those that have that kind of use case around virtual machine management, that's fully supported now in Diode. So we kind of published a blog post on that last week, and it's got a number of screenshots and kind of walks you through some of the details of these. So if you're interested, take a look. Again, netboxlabs.com/blog. You'll find the blog post for Diode there. I see there's some questions here, so I'm just going to quickly. So great question. So one of the questions we have here is, so Diode uses stage changes feature, or is branching required? So currently Diode does not use branching. It was developed in the last winter and in the spring, before branching was available. We are currently working on making Diode branch aware and starting to support branching. So that'll kind of be on the lookout for that, probably happening later this year, but currently it does not rely on branching. A few other questions. Will Diode allow import of VLAN tags to interface which we can't currently do in the CSV imports? We'll have to look into the details. So currently the Diode supports all attributes of interfaces. But it does not model VLANs today. So VLANs are out of the scope. So if they're tagged onto the interface, we might be able to. We'll have to look at the details, but we don't actually support importing of VLANs today. And can't read the whole question, but there's a question around Diode and NetBox Cloud and NetBox Enterprise. So currently we don't host Diode as part, because it's still part of the public preview. So we're not currently hosting it as part of NetBox Cloud or NetBox Enterprise, but that is in the plans again for later this year when we move to GA. So that'll be the big push to GA, is to offer these as hosted services. So today, the way you'd work this is you'd host it somewhere else, whether it's in the cloud, you can actually do it on your laptop. You can kind of run it anywhere. Currently, we support running it in a Docker environment. So we provide a Docker Compose to run the whole Diode ingestion service locally or wherever you have a Docker infrastructure. We'll actually be releasing a Helm chart for that this week. So you'll be on the lookout for that if you'd want to be able to run it in your Kubernetes cluster. But that is all leading up to actually hosting it in the cloud and in NetBox Enterprise sometime later this fall. So hopefully that answers the question. So on that note, I'll keep moving. The other big piece of news is we've announced the release of the change management plugin. So I mentioned earlier there will be an event next week, a webinar that Rich Bibby will be hosting, kind of going into the details of change management. And the underpinnings of that is a change management plugin. So this new plugin it builds upon branching. So it's fully dependent on branching. What it brings though is change management workflows to NetBox. So we've often used those who've kind of heard us either been part of the private preview or part of the design partner programs associated with this. We often talk about the analogy of branching being a little bit like Git, and change management is sort of like the GitHub on top of that. So it allows you to create what we're calling CRs or change requests, but kind of analogous to PRs in the GitHub world. So they allow you to collaborate on changes that are being proposed in a branch. So you can create a change request associated with that. You could actually associate review policies to define like how many reviews do you need to move this change request forward, and approvals, and ultimately things like threaded comments so that you can actually exchange within your team on commenting or debating or having that conversation about a specific change and whether that's accurate or whether other changes are needed in that branch before you ultimately merge it. So again, as I mentioned, we just announced the release of this. There's also a blog post that kind of walks through some of the details of that. And again, there's the webinar next week. And this will actually be available as customer preview in both NetBox Cloud and NetBox Enterprise very, very shortly. Should sometime probably later this week, we'll be making this available. I'm just looking at, so I got a question from Pete. Can you clarify on the term branching aware? I know firsthand of some plugins that break when used together with branches rather. Yeah, so I'm not sure which context whether that Pete's question was in the context of Diode or in change management, but I'm going to assume that it's in the context of both. So Diode will not be just branching aware. It'll actually use branches that allow you to write to a specific branch. So the ingestion service to the previous slide, the intent there is definitely to make it so that you can actually selectively, instead of writing to main, which is what we're now calling kind of the core NetBox database, you can actually write to main, or you could actually selectively write to a specific branch. And similarly, change management, obviously relies on branching, so it allows you to create a change request associated with a branch to have that kind of workflow and approval process prior to actually, committing that or applying, or what we're calling merging that branch or all the sets of changes in that branch to the main NetBox database. So on that note, I think we'll move forward, and I think we're on to the highlights of our meeting every month, which I'm always looking forward to, is our guest speakers. So maybe first up is Adam, and maybe I can get Mark, you to jump in and make our introductions today.
Sure thing. I noticed one more question that I'll answer quickly. Omri Abu asked, will there, I suppose that means, be an option to prevent user edit permissions on the main branch and to limit it only to modify a branch? The answer is yes. As part of change management, we're calling that protected main. That's not in there today, but that will be coming along. All right, we've got the speakers today, so I'm excited about this. I'm always excited about this, but I'm particularly excited about this because we had the opportunity to bring two speakers who are talking about a very similar theme, which is making network automation easier. As I mentioned earlier, have been working with Peter from SlurpIt and others on our upcoming AutoCon workshop. And as part of that, there's a whole bunch of interacting with devices in there, and that can be really tricky. So we've got two speakers today who've been spending a ton of time making that easier. I'm going to start with Adam. Adam, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
All right. Now, we're controlling your slides, so you'll have to ask us to proceed when you want us to. Just before we do that, Richard, Peter will be sharing his own slides for his talk. So I don't know if we need to figure that out in the permissions somehow. But anyway, Adam, I'll let you get started.
Cool, thanks. So yeah, I was very excited to come here and chat. Mark messaged me last week and was like, hey, do you want to talk about this little utility that you created? And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll figure something out. So we both created the slides together, and hopefully this will be interesting to you guys. So my name is Adam Kirchberger, and I'm a lead automation consultant at Nomios. So we're a networking and cybersecurity solution provider based in Europe, and we have a dedicated network automation team, which I'm very lucky to be a part of. And we've been working with a lot of customers to essentially automate their networks. And NetBox is a big part of what we do. But Netconf is also something that we use quite a lot. And I find that the ecosystem and the tooling around it could sometimes be better. And we're trying to, anything that we create that we find is kind of reusable and we think might be interesting for the rest of the community, we're planning to publish that as open source tools on our Nomios open source GitHub, and this is one of them. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about it. So you can go on to the next slide. So what is Netconf? I thought this would be a good slide just to get everybody on the same page, because I know that we see a lot of stuff with automation and everybody seems to kind of jump to NetMiko and CLI, SSH-based operations, and Netconf is an alternative to that. And it is the preferred protocol that we use in all of our projects. So Netconf is a vendor-agnostic network management protocol. It's an RPC-based API, so it's not REST. It's using RPC calls, and it's over an SSH connection. It is fast, and what I mean by that is it supports all of the CRUD operations that we're used to, create, read, update, delete, and it also prevents under and overfetching. So if anyone's familiar with the GraphQL way of doing things, where you can select what you want and you can update parts and you can fetch deep trees, you can do all of that with Netconf, and this thing's been around for much longer than GraphQL. Another reason why I think it's also really fast actually is you can do multiple CRUD operations in a single request. So if you wanted to, I don't know, add a user and delete a VLAN at the same time, or maybe add a user and add a VLAN and configure an interface and make sure that some other part of the configuration is, however you want it to be, you could do all of that in one request rather than having to do a get request and then an update request and then a delete request. You can do that all in one operation, which is extremely efficient. Another reason is it's very reliable. So if you're used to using stuff like text FSM or regex or CLI, plain text parsing, you don't have to do that with Netconf. It's all model driven. So it uses a language called Yang, which defines all these data models. And unfortunately, every vendor has their own Yang model. There are some efforts to create some open config standards models using Yang, but they're very specialized, and at the moment they're just for service provider modeling. So yeah, it's much better because you don't have to be parsing anything. You don't have to worry about a firmware upgrade suddenly breaking all of your parsing, and it's mature, as I said. So believe it or not, it was published in 2011, well ahead of its time. And it's been implemented by all the major network vendors, which is great. And there's also a lot of tooling around it for Python, Go, whatever you're using. Next slide. So automated testing. I'm very passionate about testing, and in all the solutions that we build at Nomios, we try and include automated testing. We aim for 100% test coverage, but obviously that is a target. Maybe we don't always achieve that. Depends on the project. But so what do I mean by automated testing? So in software testing, we have unit tests, integration tests, all of that, and they're very lightweight. They leverage mocking, which means you don't need to if you're testing a big system, you don't have to have every single component running at the same time. You can just replicate parts of it and just test your portion of the code in isolation. And they're nearly free to run because they're just running on either containers or lightweight software. But when you think about network testing, I think we automatically jump to this like, oh God, network testing. I'm going to need to, get some rack space. I'm going to have to get some equipment, some licenses. It is more complicated, and it requires, manual setup and teardown. So I think what I'm trying to say is, for the automation tools that we're creating, it doesn't mean we shouldn't test the network portion. We should still be trying to test the network part. And that's what we created here. So the next slide. Yeah, so this is what I was saying. So automation platform testing is what I'm talking about. I'm not saying that we're going to replace network testing with Ixia traffic generators and all that stuff. We're just testing the automation components. So if you're building a network automation platform that's using, maybe NetBox, maybe it's using NetPicker and SlurpIt or whatever IP fabric tools, anything you've got, you're building a platform, and within it, you've got all of these different apps or microservices, whatever your organization calls them. And one of them will be responsible for connecting to devices, whether it's, for pushing configuration or reading configuration or whatever you're doing with the devices, one of these services will be speaking to them. And what we're proposing with this tool is that you can mock those devices. So we want to make automated platform testing accessible. We want to make it fast so that you can run it in CI/CD pipelines, and lightweight. So again, we're doing the same like mocking approaches that we use in normal software testing approaches. The next slide. So this is what we've created. We called it PyTest Netconf. It is a plugin that is built for PyTest, which is a test framework for Python. So it replicates the devices, so it mimics the Netconf implementation down to the RFC. So rather than spinning up a virtual device, you can just say, I'm going to send a request to fetch VLANs from this device, and then I want this device to reply back with this specific response. So it means that you can very quickly spin these things up. You can test all of your automation platform to see how it handles these requests. If you're using libraries like NC Client or Scraply or, the other one, I can't remember the name of, Netconf Client, I think it is. It means that you can actually test those all the way down to the device. And the actual library has 100% test coverage as well. So if you go and look on GitHub, you'll see that we're testing all of these different Netconf clients. And yeah, that's it. I mean, I invite you guys to have a look at the GitHub page, see if it's of interest. If you have any questions, I'm here to help. And yeah, I hope it's useful for everyone.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Adam. I'd like to compliment you on your beautiful slides. Very, very good looking indeed.
That's because you made the slides.
Oh, come on, don't say that out loud. Okay, so next up, we're going to hear from Peter at SlurpIt, who's going to be talking about Mockit, which actually focuses in a very similar area. Did we manage to get the sharing fixed in the meantime?
I think I just did request access. Yeah, I think I have it. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Shall I start sharing then?
Yes, please. Take it away.
Okay. So my slides are not as fancy as Adam's because I thought it was more like a technical thing. I was like, oh, I do it on the fly. That's what I like to do. But Adam, kudos for that because it looked really nice. So I was like,
I told Mark I wasn't going to have time to make the slides. So,
so when I saw Adam talking, I was like, okay, I can do something similar as well. So to give like a brief introduction, I'm Peter, I'm from SlurpIt. And within SlurpIt, we do network discovery. So we try to make some kind of platform where it's really easy for yourself to build, like we call it plannings with templates to collect any kind of network data from your network. And from there on, like NetBox make this nice architecture where you can see what we will also do in a workshop in Denver. Actually, like we will be a piece in trying to fill your NetBox system automatically. If you're interested, just go to our website and try it out. But talk about that. During our creation of SlurpIt, we had the same problem, actually what Adam just talked about. And it was like, okay, we need something to test our product, because we use under the hood open source, and we also try to provide back to the open source. We call it kind of like a hybrid model. And we're like, okay, we need to make sure that everything we use keeps working. So how do we test this? And back then there was even Container Labs was still small, or even not released yet, I think. So we're like, okay, we need a way for our templates, our code to have it tested automatically, because we contribute a lot on NetMiko. But we're like, yeah, okay, if something in NetMiko is updated, how do we know for our existing customers that it would still work? And back then in Denver, I even saw like on the presentation from Kirk that he said like, yeah, the most time I spent on NetMiko is like testing, making sure everything still works, and so on. So we were thinking about that. We were like, okay, let's build a simulator. Let's first build it in-house, and then when it works, just make it open source and release it. And that's what I'm going to talk about, and that's what we call Mockit. So what we did with Mockit is we have been, I think for 2 months, reverse engineering every vendor module inside NetMiko. So we had to see how does the prompt response, which kind of commands are sent as well, like when you log in. And by doing that, we create a simulator which can communicate with the 117 vendors NetMiko supports. And in there you can script, you can do show commands. We integrated OpenAI, and that's kind of what I want to show you today. We try as well to publish a couple of videos, so where you can see a bit what the power of it is and how you can use it yourself. But what we mainly in SlurpIt do is every time we commit an update to our Git repo, our CI/CD will like spin up 117 vendors inside NetMiko, and it will still verify like, okay, can we connect to it? Can we execute a command? Do we get a response? And so on. And I kind of want to show you a little bit how that works. So I have here the Mockit project, and next to just like simulating a network device, we added a couple other things, because on the way while building it, like the first customers came in and they had like all devices where we would be kicked out the first time we tried to log in. So we needed to build in SlurpIt a device retry. So we're like, okay, how are we going to simulate this? So we created an option for it, login retry, where you can just configure yourself how often, for example, Mockit in this case, will kick you out before the session is successful. So if I spin it up here, and it's running, and I go here to my Docker desktop, you see here like the backend of Mockit, so how it responds. And what I'm gonna do now, I get my terminal, I try to log in, and you don't see it, but it immediately kicks me out here. And here inside the container, you see like, okay, first attempt rejected. You have to do that again. Second attempt rejected. And now I do it one more time. Then it should work. Third attempt accepted. So you can configure the amount of times SSH in this case where it rejects you before you can log in. And we do the same with delay. So if you have a very slow line and you want to test out the timeout session, for example, you can set a timeout to the login, but you can also set a timeout for the device response. This way we had like an ARP table once, which took almost, I think, 2 minutes before it returns all its data. And we're like, yeah, those are kind of situations we did not oversee when building SlurpIt. So any kind of scenario we try to replicate in our test environment. And for that, we needed Mockit, because you don't have those physical devices around you to simulate those kind of scenarios. So that's what I personally find really powerful. Then what we did on top of it is we integrated SNMP. So every NetMiko vendor, all of them you see in here, it can respond to SNMP as well. You can just connect to it, and it gives you like a return. In this case, it gives you a fixed SNMP fallback, but just to test your SNMP scripting. We are actually integrating Adam's Netconf. I think that will be later this month or next month. Then we can actually release that, but we are trying to integrate it. And what we did on top of that was like we integrated the OpenAI API. And what it will do is it will respond for us on missing content. So if you try to do SNMP, for example, on this, I don't know what it is, Pluribus, never heard of it. If it's not in there, then OpenAI will try to respond for you. And it's the same with commands. So how we set it up is when you spin up the container, you set a device type. And from this device type, it will browse to the folder. And in the folder, you have a couple options. So you have scripts, where you can actually script your own logic, which I will show later on. You got templates, where it will respond based on the command. So for example, you see here, you see show ARP. If I relaunch this, wait, I have to spin it up first. Give me a sec. Okay, I disabled the login retry, restart. And it's pretty fast, by the way, as well. So we run this in our sandboxes as well. This way we have like a low performance system where we can give people access to and just play around. The only problem is you're a little bit limited in commands and so on, what you can do. Because yeah, it's not a real device. Wait, let me restart the session. So I have here, it's running. Okay, so here you see it's coming in. We're in. And this is how it looks like. So the terminal is really like a real terminal. You even see like, okay, we changed the window size and so on. What I also like about this is actually that you can monitor what your other automation tools are doing, because anything I type in here is being logged. So you have full control to see, okay, we have a new supplier and they do network automation. Like, what are they actually typing on our network? So yeah, it's kind of a, I don't know how you call it, but kind of a monitoring tool at the same time. But if I do show IP ARP, for example, in this case, you will see it responds to me with the output, which is actually, I had show ARP here, which is being shown here. So it will just imitate the existing configurations here. If I type any command which is not in here, so I do show NetBox, it will say, well, it was a command, we had nothing, and then it's asking ChatGPT in this case, like, hey, do you know? And then for Cisco iOS, so there's a prompt in it, you can see that in the code. Do you know for Cisco iOS the command show netbox? And then it even returns like, hey, it's invalid input detected. But it's quite cool. In this case, you can also like shorten things. And yeah, the command is not in there. So he's again asking ChatGPT and he will respond this way. So this way, the Mockit thing starts to feel a bit more real. We do have like abbreviations in here that it understands, like SH as show, for example. Oh, doesn't in this case. Let me see. It's brief, because I do think I have this one. IP interface brief. Yeah, so this one, it says here the command is replaced. So it goes from SH, which you can see here, to show, and then it will just get it directly from the folder. So it's just a way to imitate the devices in a nutshell with a couple fancy things on top. Now we did add, Adam talked about it as well, like a CRUD on top of it. So we have the possibility here to also configure your devices. So it is still a bit limited. But what we did is we created like a SQLite database in here with some basic CRUD attributes. So you can create your table, your record, and so on. And then you can put your own logic around it. And yeah, the imitator will get it. So if I would type now show VLANs, there's nothing yet, so it will not return anything. If I would say add VLAN 99, and I would do again, show VLANs, it returns VLAN 99. So I know this is very basic, but you can become as creative as you want because it's just Python. So you can just create your own functions and so on. And then you can do configuration on top of it as well. And I remember in my team, they were in the beginning like, why would you want this? And I told them like, well, it depends how creative you are. But if you would put this on a Linux machine, you would install, let's say, an OSPF library. I think it's in theoretical possible to actually have it communicate, but that's maybe a little bit too far. But yeah, in essence, what is a router or switch? It's a Linux machine with a prompt and commands which it can read and write to. So we're very far from that. But what in essence, what we try to achieve is a lightweight machine to test your automation, and in our case as well to run in the sandboxes. Yeah, that's it, I think.
Thank you, Peter. That's fantastic. We had one question from the chat, which I think you just actually answered with the last section, but I'm going to ask it anyway. It's from Chelsea Williams. If anyone's been on one of these calls before, you'll know that we have a mysterious guest somewhere hidden in our Zoom configuration that calls everybody Chelsea Williams. So if you're Chelsea Williams and you ask this question, please identify yourself. But the question is, hold on, just scrolling down. Can we customize the output for other purposes, like providing a mock ISIS link state database for parsing /text FSM?
I think so. Yeah,
I think that's what you just demoed at the end, right? With the ability to create custom tables and populate them using different commands.
Yeah, but even if you would store like the text files there and you would like to manipulate them a little bit based on the statement you give, like you can just read in the configuration files and yeah, have it trigger based on whatever you want. So I would say yes, it's possible. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. Well, if you've got any more questions,
actually, so Richard jumping in, I think Pete has a question. So I'm going to allow him to talk. So you should be able to talk, Pete. You there, Pete? I guess he's maybe
Pete, it looks like you're muted if you're trying to talk, but you could also just drop the question into the chat and we can pick it up there. All right, I'm going to assume there's some kind of audio problem there, Richard, so we'll move along. I just want to say thank you to Adam and Peter for agreeing to do this. It was super last minute, and I'm just really happy that we could get two really interesting tools on a similar kind of theme here to help you when you're building out your automation. Actually, Pete has just dropped his question in the chat.
Yeah, he's just saying he doesn't have a question.
I don't have a question, he says.
Don't have a question. Okay, got it. Right. Okay. In that case, we can move along. Thank you again to Adam and Peter.
Yes, thank you very much. And on that note, back to the broader group, like we want to hear your NetBox story. And actually, we say NetBox story. Actually, it's anything and everything that's related to network automation, whether it's NetBox related directly or indirectly, like today. I think these are great tools. I thought both of these presentations were great. I learned a lot. There's lots more to explore. So these are the kinds of stories we'd love to hear for how you're using NetBox or other tooling you're building around your network automation stack. And whether it's on this call, whether it's writing a blog, whether it's just talking to the NetBox Labs team, we'd love to hear your story. So feel free to reach out. You can reach out to myself, Richard. You can reach out to Mark. You can reach out to anybody at NetBox Lab. We'd love to connect with you and hear your story. Anything you want to add to that, Mark?
Yeah, just maybe probably the easiest way, if you don't already know us or have our emails, you can find us on social media pretty easily. And then the other way is just to go to netdev.chat if you're not already in the NetDev community, and you can find us both there under our names.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Mark. And that kind of brings us to the end of our call. So the next call is scheduled for Tuesday, November 12th. Thanks for everyone for attending. At this point, we're going to shut down the recording, but if there are any other questions, any topics that anybody wants to discuss, without the glare of the recording, all topics are valid. So On that note, I'm going to thank Mark and thank our speakers, Peter and Adam. Thanks everyone, and we'll see you next month. And we'll close down the recording at this point.